Ms. Fluke terribly to be called names and in such a public way for really exercising a right that we all have. And so I think what is really interesting about leadership is that we think that we're all in charge of our lives and that we have a plan and that we're going to become leaders in whatever capacity, but sometimes it's accidental, it's unintended. And that's really, I set as my goal to tell my story about what happened to me in the workplace. And that was my goal. I did not, the unintended consequences, of course, is what happened later. And I tell people all the time that my testimony really is not what changed things. It was the public reaction to my testimony that changed things. So the people in this room actually made the change that happened in the workplace by their response to the testimony and by struggling with the issues that were raised and working them out in their homes and in their workplaces. And that's how change occurred. I may have been a catalyst for getting people to think about those things, but the change occurred because people out there afterwards hearing it decided that it was time for a change.
But see, I think that's just so intelligently using your platform at the moment. Societal's reaction to that use of your platform created the impact, but we all have platforms to use. I mean, that's what leadership is about. It's every one of us every day using whatever platform we have to do things that cause reactions and actions.
And you're right, because I think that every day that I walk into a classroom, I have a platform.
Yeah.
And every day that I walk into a classroom and I stand in front of, whether it's a small seminar of 5 people or a large lecture of, at one point, 120 people, you have a platform. And something that you can do will change people that you're standing in front of. And so we have to really understand that we have these opportunities for leadership that don't necessarily fit the sort of stereotypical hierarchical model of leadership. We have that in our experiences every day, and that we can exercise it as such, and we should own it. I shouldn't be embarrassed by saying, yes, when I stand in front of a classroom, I'm a leader, and I'm trying to do something that will change the way people think. I believe that that's part of my job. My provost is here. He may disagree with me. I hope he doesn't, but it's on the table there. So I think we all have to find that in our day-to-day work and use it and claim it and really pursue it aggressively.
In the way that only we are authentically capable. When you answer your question, I remember one time sitting with Secretary Clinton in her early days as Secretary of State. She had convened a small group of women to the top floor of the State Department to advise her on, how to advance the agenda around women. There were probably 10 women around the table. She said, I want to go around, I want to hear from each of you about your opinions. And I was last. So all the others went first. And it's a group of friends. I mean, we all knew each other. Each woman spoke about her views. And I sat there with my platform from the private sector. I was the only business person in the room. And I had listened to 9 of my friends talk in words that I knew if any of my business colleagues were sitting in the room, they wouldn't have understood one word that had been said. So it comes to me, number 10. And I've heard 9 people, and it was more rights driven, and women as victims, and we need to do. And it got to me, and I said, I just have to say that if there were CEOs in the room who control resources, money, and power, they wouldn't have understood anything that was said in the last hour. If we could change our language to one of the economy and women as economic engines versus victims, then business might get interested in helping with this agenda and trying to change that conversation. Again, that's just using my authentic platform that I could do in that room. You have the authentic platform. Abby has a huge authentic platform.
And Abby, you're all about the platform. Your business is the platform. Tell me a little bit about what you see as the ultimate goal of your work.
Well,
what's your mission?
What was clear to me when I found that story in Liberia and found Ginny, my partner, and started working was that there was something that I knew at an intellectual level had been happening since the beginning of time, which is women do things and we forget it. And then so every woman who steps up to do something thinks she's doing something for the first time. And it's so difficult to create out of whole cloth anything, thinking that you're the first one. So that this is a very powerful thing to get erased and erased and erased from the record like that. And it seemed possible in this one case to pull something back from the edge of forgetting, pull it back and bring it in and establish it as really the part of the received record of what really happened. And you know, as soon as we saw the effect that that film had on women who were thinking about their role in conflict and thinking about their roles in their governments and in their communities around the world. I mean, it was pretty incredible. We took this film out to country after country after country. Srebrenica in Bosnia was our first audience. You would think one thing has nothing to do with the other, except that these women, Serbs and Muslims, sat together and watched a film about Liberian women and saw themselves in it. And then proceeded to want to talk about what they were going to do in their town that day and next week and next month. So there was this really important and unlocking thing that occurred when you showed this film. And I really believe it's about being made visible to yourself, the power of that. And so Ginny and I and then Pam connected around the idea that, you know, there was this enormous untold story. And that untold stories are not simply just things we forgot to tell. They are really actively being erased. This, I mean, this blows my mind every time I think about it. There's this pivotal moment in Pray the Devil Back to Hell when the women take the Peace Hall hostage. There are warlords and former presidents and members of the European community there. And one of the people present said, there's CNN footage of me trying to climb out a window. So, you know, immediately I thought, oh, well, there'll be archival footage. We searched. BBC News was there, Sky News was there, CNN was there, sorry. Nobody shot it. Nobody shot it. It wasn't just that they didn't keep it. They didn't shoot. So how are we supposed to become part of the record if we're not even by the cameraman recognized as having enough value, you know, to just simply make it into the frame? And so we really felt like we had an incredible opportunity to make sure that the frame got readjusted, to include this enormously important story about what women do in this cultural activity, which is, you know, of all the things that have happened over millennia, war is the one that we kind of never forget is always happening there. But we always think it's a man's job, it's a man's effort, it's in a man's interest, and we never see the women involved. So it seemed really important to kind of reassert them and make them part of the frame.
What are the things that female leaders that you see in your experience, whether it's a corporate experience or standing in front of students and leading in a university or internationally with women who others might look on it as powerless and voiceless. Mm-hmm. Where do they intersect in terms of things that make a good leader? That if you were to pluck them out, you'd gather them all around and say, wow, you all share these certain characteristics.
You know, the sample size is pretty small at this point. So we can't really truthfully say what we know about a female leader. You know, and the truth is the sample size for women leaders they're not really the norm, right? They're the people who've made it through the gauntlet to the top. I think that when we push women all the way up through the pipeline from the very beginning, and then we see them move into leadership, then we'll start to see some of the benefits of women's leadership. And those will come from the fact of what women's lives involve. And I mean, one of the things I get criticized for doing this work in focusing on women in peace is The idea that maybe we're implying that men do war and women do peace, and that there's something magic in the estrogen that makes us all perfect. Well, I'm about to say that's not true, and I don't think it's true. And get between me and a brownie, and you can see violence. There's violence there. So I do think that there's been hardly a single culture through the history of time that hasn't offered us the job of bringing in new life and carrying out the dead and taking care of the sick and feeding and clothing and housing and educating. That's what we do in almost every place on earth. So whether it's in the estrogen or what, I don't care. I think we waste so much time on that question. What we know is that peace is a necessary precondition to our succeeding at what we do. And so if we move people into leadership all the way across from dog catcher up to president, who in fact pursue those things as their life and value them and count them as mattering more than institutions, you know, more than reputations, then we'll see a change in the political discourse.
Where do you see a grouping of
I agree about moving people up the pipeline, but in many ways the pipeline is a problem. There are so many ways that the pipeline just does not fit women's experiences. Just for example, in an academic setting, women are getting tenured and maybe becoming departmental chairs. At the same time, they're trying to juggle family responsibilities. And so the pipeline sort of squeezes them between their obligations to family and their obligations to the institution and to their research pursuits. So sometimes the pipeline is the problem, and so you get sort of set back in terms of the track, and you aren't able to catch up. There are also problems, I think, in terms of really recognizing when women are actual leaders, but they don't have the titles. So they're actually doing work that's making effective change and doing things that are good for their organization, but they don't have the title and they don't get the recognition. And so they don't get to advance up the pipeline in the same kinds of way that their male counterparts do, who may be moving up the pipeline, but not doing as much that's actually as valuable to the institution. So how we define the pipeline can be a problem. But if I had to say, I think a lot of times, and it goes back to this being your authentic self, women still, I see them moving into leadership. They are not necessarily moving it in the same way or at the same pace that we have sort of set out for them, but they're moving in that direction. In academics, the numbers of us going into college and academic careers, in judgeships, in the legal profession, the numbers are good. And I think it's sort of in a matter of time, the leadership will happen. The numbers will be better, but we still have to keep pushing it. And then finally, I would just say that what I've also found about women in leadership is many of them get into leadership because of something that really matters to them, and they have to pursue it. And it's not that they have decided that they wanted to be the head of an organization or they wanted to run something. It's because they care about an issue or a problem, and they want it addressed, and they know that they have something to add. And so I think there are a couple of ways to become a leader. One is to go up through the pipeline, but the other is for people to find that thing that they're really passionate about and become the leader that is needed to address it.